Wow, it's a full crowd.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Belinda Gurgle, and I am a member of the board of the Charleston Literary Festival. Welcome to the festival. I've attended the festival since its inception, and I must say, this year is simply over the top. Were Friday and Saturday's programs not incredible? Just wonderful? And how about that extra hour of sleep we got this morning, okay? Folks, we are so lucky and fortunate to have this literary festival in our city. Through the generosity of wonderful donors and supporters, urged on by our beautiful and talented development director, Suzanne Pollock, financial resources have been secured to underwrite this world-class festival. Please take a look at these fabulous people who donate, who are listed in the back of your program. Today's session is underwritten by 3 incredible donors whose love of books, whose love of the discussion of ideas and community is unparalleled. Our founders, Jerry and Walter Fiederowitz, where are they? Somewhere close by. Okay, who moved to Charleston a little over a decade ago and have made their mark in the cultural life of our city and state. Second supporter of today's event is board member Lee McNary and her husband John. They are North Carolina natives who spend a good part of the year here, and they care deeply about education and opportunity. And finally, South Carolina's own native philanthropist, Russell Holliday. Whose gifts have enhanced so many of our state's cultural institutions. Let's give them all one more round of applause. Today we kick off day 3 of the festival with consideration of an important new book by Professor Eddie S. Glaude Jr. that truly highlights what has to be the most important question of our day and of this particular moment. What is the future of our great American democracy, and what is our role as individual citizens in ensuring that it not only survives but thrives? Folks, we are in for what I know will be a riveting discussion between Professor Glaude and business leader extraordinaire Joan Robinson Berry. Professor Glaude, the James S. McDonnell Distinguished University Professor at Princeton University and founding chairman of Princeton's Department of African American Studies, is one of this nation's leading intellectuals. A native of Moss Point, Mississippi, population 12,000, and the son of working class parents. Professor Glaude told an interviewer in the Princeton magazine that he grew up in a home that had almost no books. But he loved to read, and he found books in school and in the public library. As a high school student, he participated in a statewide youth program to encourage young folks in Mississippi to participate in state government. We know it here in South Carolina as Boys State, and he was the first African American to be elected student governor of Mississippi. He graduated from high school at the age of 16 and enrolled at Morehouse College in Atlanta. An historic black college for men that is rooted in liberal arts learning and character development. As Professor Glaude later recalled of his arrival at Morehouse, quote, "I was trying to find my way. I read, but I didn't read in a disciplined way." His Morehouse professors nurtured this young man. Furthermore, he recalled that it was at Morehouse that his political sensibility was transformed. It became much more focused, he recalled, on the circumstances of black people, not just politics in general. He subsequently enrolled in a graduate program in African American Studies at Temple University, and then went on to Princeton, where he earned a doctorate in religion. And by the way, today he serves on the board of Morehouse. He is the author of several books, including Democracy in Black and the New York Times bestseller, Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own, which won the Harriet Beecher Stowe Book Prize and was featured at our 2022 festival. Now, many of us know him as that dashing, thoughtful commentator, as he is frequently on programs like Morning Joe and Deadline White House. Joan Robinson Berry is one of our nation's foremost leaders in the field of aerospace engineering and operations. A native of Los Angeles, she recently retired, got some fans out there. She recently retired from a 35-year career, I don't know how she could be that old, at the Boeing Company, where she held key leadership positions in global engineering, maintenance and modifications for all Boeing government and commercial product lines. As Senior Vice President and Chief Engineer for Boeing Global, she led a $22 billion business unit. How about that? Of course, we know her as the Vice President and General Manager of Boeing, South Carolina. Ms. Robinson Berry earned a BS degree in engineering technology from California State Polytechnic University, Pomona, and an MBA in engineering and industrial management from West Coast University. She holds honorary doctorates from 3 different universities, so I'm gonna call her Dr. Robinson Berry. She has been recognized as one of 50 most powerful women in America. And and serves on numerous corporate and philanthropic boards. She is on the very short list of innovative and dynamic leaders in this country and is now closely involved with a variety of groups to improve the educational outcomes of underserved children. Let's welcome Dr. Glaude and Dr. Berry back to Charleston, and let's settle in for their insights on the future of our great country.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm just excited to be here today. You know, we're going to have fun. We're going to have a conversation. That's why we brought our little coffee mugs here. So, you know, hold your seats. And I have to tell you, I got so many calls from so many of my friends because we got a lot of Eddie's fans and groupies here in the audience. Can you say, he is back by popular demand. And they said, what is, I'm getting all this buzz, and my husband said, you're getting all these phone calls about Eddie, what is it, And some of the folks said, he's from Mississippi, he's one of us, he's got that Charleston kind of vibe, Others said, well, and I'll probably have to explain this to you, sisters in the house, he's a Morehouse man. And for those of you who don't understand what that means, when we're growing up, some of the parents said, make sure you get a good college education and get you a Morehouse man. Well, we have a Morehouse man here on the stage today. Others, and I'm not going to embarrass you, Dr. Oren Garcia, if you're in the audience today, they said he is kind of soft on the eyes, especially on TV, and we love his conversation. But I'm most impressed with his ability just to articulate very important points. I'm a rocket science. He's one of those literary giants, iconic in his writing, and that's what I'm lucky to be on the stage to kind of have this conversation. And so we're excited to have you here, because if you read that book, you had to have intellectual rigor to get through it, because it is a really well-written, masterful use of language. And I have to tell you, you highlighted all my personal heroes. And I don't want to have spoiler alerts if you haven't read the book, but everybody that is important to our community is kind of highlighted in this book. And so let's get right to it.
Sure.
We are the leaders that we've been looking for. Your writing is, again, a masterful blend of excellence. What inspired you to write this book? Tell us a little bit about it, and what are your personal experiences that flow through this theme? Can you just give us be that #1 professor on Princeton's campus, by the way, he was voted, and tell us that story.
First of all, let me just say it's a delight to be back in Charleston, to see new friends again, to be on stage with you, to share and bask in your brilliance and your achievement. I am so honored. Miss Belinda, I hope they've recorded that so I can send that to my mama so she can understand her baby and all the fullness, So I appreciate it. What motivated me to talk? Well, let me say this before I continue. Thank you to all the people behind the scenes, the folks working the cameras, the folks who are going to run the mics, the folks who are going to clean up after us, the folks who put the microphones on us, the folks who are running all the stuff, the invisible labor that makes our gathering possible. We want to give them a big hand. So what motivated it? I was trying to find my feet. I had lost my way. The country had moved on, and 1 million people plus are dead. 2 of my closest friends, my golf partners, died. One contracted COVID. He survived. His will was strong, but his body couldn't beat it off. Another told us that if he got it, he wouldn't survive it. And he was prophetic. And in so many ways, I felt that our politics was as crazed and manic and maddening as it continues to be, because our dead was actually riding us. I'm from the country, and when people don't die right, they don't stay in the ground. They haunt. And so I was trying to find my feet, and my editor wanted at Crown wanted an election book, and I couldn't seem to find my way on the page. And so I had delivered these lectures in 2011 at Harvard. And in 2011, it was a whole different time. I was annoyed that people were interpreting the Black freedom tradition as kind of the Obama presidency as the fulfillment of the Black freedom tradition. That angered me. And I was trying to figure out how to disentangle this extraordinary tradition of political activism from, those people who were so excited to get invitations to the White House. And so I decided to go back and look at these lectures, because out of those lectures came 4 books. It was a period of real interesting fertility for me. I was trying to figure out who I was as a writer, so I was experimenting on the page, trying to figure out where Cornel West ended and where I began, trying to figure out what would be the nature of the politics that I was trying to commend. How could I deal with the fact that I look just like my daddy, but I'm not quite him? This man who scared me to death put so much in me. And so I decided to go back to those lectures. And when I went back to them, I found this fertile soil. And so what I decided to do was to kind of publish a prequel to all of the work that folk have been reading, to see where the Baldwin book came from, to see where the Democracy in Black book came from. And I wanted to bookend it with 2 different kinds of writing, right? Two new writing. I bookended with an introduction and a conclusion. I edited softly, relatively speaking, in between to try to see what I could do. I wanted to ask something of my readers, because people treat us as if we're just cattle chewing cud, They think that they can't throw fastballs to us. We can only hit softballs, as it were. And so I wanted to risk something on the page. And out of it came this book. And it was exactly what I needed, because I'm still not okay, if that makes sense. I'm still trying to find my feet. Tuesday is not helping at all. It's been an absolute joy to see the reaction to something I was deathly afraid to publish, but something that I needed to write and give to the world.
Well, we love that. And we are the leaders we've been looking for. Who are the we? Is it the Black community? Or is it something else?
That's a great question. In 1986, James Baldwin gave an interview, it's the year before his death, to David Estes of the New Orleans Review. And it was turned out to be this interesting reflection on Baldwin as an essayist. And Baldwin says, I don't write as a victim. I had to figure out my experience, And I had to and the only way I could figure that out is by using this pronoun we. And then he says, and we have to figure out who we is, or who we are. And then, by using Southern vernacular, who we is gives you a sense of who's at the heart of the answer to that question, right? And so part of the we is aspirational. It involves an idea of being together that is not yet in existence. Part of the we involves those folk to whom I'm indebted and to whom I care most about. Part of the we is those people who have like-minded politics. And so you have to figure out who the we is in the book, because I'm playing with it the entire way. But The title comes from Miss Ella Baker.
Come on now.
And when she says, we are the leaders we've been looking for, she's talking about all of us.
People.
Right, everybody.
And that's how I viewed it, because I said, I can view this as being a woman, as, an African American, or a scientist, just the we.
Yeah.
And so it's a bigger we.
Absolutely.
And so that brings the next topic. I used to have this blog where I used to say leadership is a verb. And this book is all about leadership. So how do you define leadership? And how do you drive it into this wonderful book?
Leadership evidences itself in so many different ways. It's the manifestation of our talents and capacities in the jointly shared effort to make a better world, wherever one happens to be located. To pursue ends and aims together with others. And so leadership at its best, I think, involves or entails those folks who are able to create the conditions in which the talents and capacities of folk around them come into full view. Leaders aren't the folks who are leading the march, aren't the folk who's always in front of the camera. No, these are the folks who understand what it means to have an end in mind, a vision or a mission that drives us, and to be able to mobilize the skill sets of all of us to get to the end, to accomplish the mission. And so for me, particularly in terms of political leadership, what I was trying to do in the book was to say we need to stop outsourcing our responsibility to folk. We need to stop outsourcing our responsibilities to so-called prophets. We need to stop outsourcing our responsibility to so-called heroes, right? And understand that great people, and this is Emerson's formulation, great people come to us such that even greater people can follow. And so what does it mean to understand oneself as having the capacity to lead, right? And this is the real key example. Bob Moses, the great SNCC leader, was at Princeton for a year. And when he came, I had to close my mouth. Because, I'm from Mississippi, and Bob Moses is a hero in Mississippi. I'm not possible without Bob Moses and the work that they did. And so Bob was telling me about Fannie Lou Hamer. And he said they were on the way in Sunflower County to register to vote. And they were scared to death. And they knew what they were driving into. Y'all know a little bit about something like that in South Carolina. They knew exactly what they were driving into. And he said while they were driving, people were afraid, but this person in the back of the bus was singing every hymnal in the hymn book at the top of her lungs. And people were initially kind of unsettled, right? Because the transitions were abrupt, but she was singing at the top of her lungs. And then they realized what she was doing. She was fortifying the spirit. It turned out that sharecropper was Fannie Lou Hamer. And so what was Bob telling me? He said with a kind of earned insurgency, SNCC organizers were trying to create the conditions under which local people could understand themselves as the transformative agents that they needed. They didn't need Dr. King to helicopter in. They didn't need NAACP. They needed themselves. And these sharecroppers who could barely read a sentence turned out to be the transformative force in the state of Mississippi. And I'm sitting up here thinking to myself, now that's a lesson. That's a lesson we need to learn in this moment.
Absolutely. And so what I loved most about the book is that you weave some of these iconic heroes, if you will, with Martin Luther King, with Malcolm X, and of course, Ella Baker, girl power. I have to just say that. Talk about how you were able to take the concept of who they are,
right, and
then from a historical perspective, connect it to leadership.
Of the leadership, the model of leadership that I was commending, right?
Yes.
I mean, in so many ways, the book is autobiographical. I grew up in this working class household. My dad was a postman. That's how I cotton back in the day, though. My mother dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. She always she insists that I get that right. And in so many ways, I had to imagine myself with tools that were not of my own making. Right? And I found examples in books. And so Dr. King was essential. Right? Miss Mitchell, 8th grade, was my history teacher. She taught me the Civil War. She taught the Civil War strangely, though, because I ended up loving Stonewall Jackson. That don't make sense. It's kind of strange. I think I told y'all that before. That's kind of strange. But she also taught the Civil Rights Movement, and she asked me to deliver King's "I Have a Dream" speech. And I went to the library. I got the vinyl. I'm showing my age. And I started it over and over again, and I memorized it. So King became capillary. And then I went to Morehouse, and there's this statue of Dr. King pointing to the campus. And so King was everywhere for me. I was socialized into his ideology. So I tried to mimic his cadence, right? Although I was raised Catholic, I was trying to find this Baptist rhythm, as it were. And when I got to Morehouse, I got baptized in Baptist waters, as it were. And then when I was there as a freshman, I was 16 years old. I thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. And this guy came up to me and he said, you look like you're smart, but you really don't know who you are. And he gave me Malcolm's autobiography. And to this day, it was my first. I went back to Graves Hall. I read the autobiography from cover to cover. And to this day, my goatee is a testimony to that conversion experience. Because I found in the autobiography language for my father's rage, language for the anger I had in me. So here I am trying to construct a sense of who I take myself to be as a man, as a black man, as an aspiring leader. And Dr. King and Malcolm were these critical resources in self-creation. And then, of course, I had to end up in the hands of Miss Baker to shake loose from that notion of what it meant to be a man and a leader, to understand that the pose and posture that I had created was actually my constraint, were shackles in some ways.
That's powerful.
And so the arc of the book is not just simply an abstract meditation on race and politics and democracy and leadership. It's a kind of self-discovery. Right? What does it mean to imagine oneself in the most expansive of terms? How does one deal with one's own wounds and scars and bruises? I was loved hard, but it left some marks. And, how can I put this? Baldwin put it, I think he said it perfectly. The messiness of the world, and I'm paraphrasing him here, the messiness of the world is a reflection of the messiness of our interior lives. And that if we want a better world, we got to become better people. And if we're going to become better people, we got to deal with the mess that's in us. And if we're going to be the leaders that we're looking for, we're going to have to deal with all that gunk that gums us up. And that's the thing.
This is so inspiring, and I consider this book a call for action. There's a couple books that, as a leader, I used to require my mentees to read. This is a new one that I'm going to add to that.
Thank you. They're going to be so mad at you.
No, well, it makes you better. And so, how do ordinary citizens, us, in this room, be better and to improve this democracy and some of the actions you call for in this book for us to be the leaders that we're looking for?
It's an interesting question. It's an important question, but it's a hard question, right? How do we become better people, right? And that involves a kind of inventory of what orients you in particular sorts of ways, what moves you about. If you're not self-aware, if you've repressed the ugliness that has been deposited in you, you're going to end up depositing it in somebody else. right? It's like I used to tell, I tell folks when I travel around the country, it's like, you have a problem with your marriage, and you're like, yeah, we're going to fix this, but you don't deal with the lie that's at the heart of it. So if you don't confront the lie that you've been telling yourself and that we've been telling ourselves as a nation, we can never release ourselves from an old self to reach for higher forms of excellences. So we have to tell ourselves the truth. And so part of that involves, for me personally, I got to deal with my daddy. He now calls me and tells me what to say on MSNBC. It's the cutest thing. It's the cutest thing. But it's a journey, right? It's a journey. So I have to deal with the fact that for such a long time I would have these nightmares of him and I squaring off, right? And I would wake up right when I had him. Right? This is the man who scared me with a look, with a glance, would freeze me, who deposited fear in me from the moment I can remember remembering. And I know that I've been trying to prove to myself for much of my life that I'm not a coward because he scared me so. And I write about this in the book, right? So what does it mean? If I would have got to this earlier, would I have done something different with my son? Would I would have raised him differently? Would I have loved him differently? Because my dad used to tell me all the time, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to prepare you for this world, and this world ain't friendly. Go talk to your mama. I don't want to be bothered with you, Now, what's the analogy? Right? As if we're going to become better, we got to engage in kind of self-reflection, to leave an old self behind, to reach for new forms of excellences. The analogy is for the nation. If we're ever going to step into a new way of being together, we have to tell the truth about who we are. Oh, we have to tell about the truth about who we are in the South more particularly, about why our soil is so dark. It's blood-soaked. The ugliness that has defined our way of life, that has given it so much beauty and character and texture. The horrors that shape the sound, when you read a Faulkner, you know something is underneath that. You read a Eudora Welty, you know something's underneath that. You read a Tennessee Williams, there's something underneath that. I should get out of Mississippi, but you get the point. Right. There's a reason why Mississippi produces all of these great writers and great musicians. There's something about that soil, right? And so as a nation, Joan, if we're going to be better or reach for higher forms of excellences, we got to stop lying to ourselves. We got to stop. And I'm just going to sound partisan for a moment. We got to stop thinking as if this is all my children. I just dated myself. Is that still on? Okay. As if Donald Trump is singularly the problem. When in fact he's the latest instantiation of the very thing that left 700,000 people dead on the battlefield. He's the latest manifestation of the compromises that were made at the very beginning of the Republic that reconciled our democratic commitments with the transatlantic slave trade, with slavery itself. And it has haunted us. What does it mean for us to tell the truth about who we are so that we can release ourselves into a different way of being together?
That's good.
That's the book.
It's about renewing the mind, and so,
And spirit,
and
right.
since we're in the Holy City and some of you guys missed church to be here, we're going to have a little church up in here.
I might.
Up in here.
I could start hooping, but
you don't get us started now.
don't let me get, I can get
You
the
know
hooping,
he's
though.
a professor, but I don't know if you know that he also studied religion and is a religious scholar. So there's a lot of biblical principles in this book. I did the correlation. I used AI, Chat GPT to do all of that, by the way. And so tell us if there was any biblical or spiritual concepts that kind of creeped its way into this book.
Oh, absolutely. Revelation, do your first works over.
Oh, come on now.
Is important. Oh my God, I've been returning to Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10. About don't fear, because I'm still your God. Because in this moment, fear and anxiety have a hold on me. But in the text, what I'm really grappling with really is what does it mean to evidence love in the world? Because the cross, to be sectarian, the cross ain't nothing but love. But I am not talking about a sentimental notion of love. When you think about, everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants a loving world, but they don't want what love demands. It demands a kind of vulnerability. Baldwin says, salvation is found in the going towards. In the going towards, reaching for the other, making oneself vulnerable in relation to another, understanding one's suffering in relation to another, such that it brings us together, not these rhetorics that separate us. And in that view, it's a certain, or in that light, the book is animated by a certain New Testament understanding, right? I'm not so much interested in Jesus the Christ. I'm interested in Jesus the minister. What is he calling us to do? And that's Howard Thurman, the great theologian, in that sense. So, yeah, love and do your first works over. We got to go back, deal with the past, to release ourselves into a new future.
Okay, so you can say, I've been to church. Okay? So I want to touch on this, maybe a little touchy subject, with the book banning and some of the other, support around Project 25 and some of the changes that are going on. If we want to be better as individuals and to renew our mind, what are some of your thoughts on how we can accomplish that?
It's so much. We're in a second lost cause. You know that, right? When we think about all of and this is Richard Slotkin, this is the historian Richard Slotkin says, this is a second lost cause. And one of the features of the first lost cause, of course, was to get control of the narrative. When you read W.B. Du Bois's classic Black Reconstruction, which was published in 1935, he has the last chapter of that book is entitled The Propaganda of History. And what he's trying to do in that moment is engage the historiography around Reconstruction, the William Dunning School coming out of Columbia, those people who were writing, the story of what happened during Reconstruction and during Redemption, and the ways in which Black people and quote-unquote carpetbaggers and all of these folk are figured in the South. And so part of that storytelling, right, absolved the region of its faults. And what's interesting is that between the collapse of Reconstruction, that's the wrong verb. Reconstruction didn't collapse, it was killed. Right, between the collapse of Reconstruction in 1954, it's just bodies. Robert Smalls here in South Carolina does a study, 55,000 Black people killed. Right? And we're not talking about the spectacle of lynching, but the story, the narrative that was told. Now, mind you, the children who grew up in the context of this first lost cause became the adults in Mississippi, in South Carolina. These were the folks who grew up, understood, imbibed that history, and were the adults in the context of the mid-20th century. The folks who were violently and vehemently defending a certain version of the South. So here we are in the second in the second lost cause. And we have this battle over the story we're going to tell ourselves. And I am overwhelmed with concern for Black and brown children who have to endure it, but I'm more worried about the white children who will grow up learning it. Because they will become the adults. You see the history? You see the connection? And so how do we address it? Well, you know, it sounds simple, but it's true. We got to tell the truth. We got to get rid of this zero-sum game approach, right? That somehow to be a just society requires that some people give up something. That deserving people have to give up things to give to undeserving people because they have us believing that there's only so much pie to go around. I don't believe that. We could bake a bigger damn pie. I've seen my mama do it.
Yes.
And you can't be decent and loving and be okay with the world as it is. I said this earlier. You don't have to have the same motivation. I say this in other settings. You don't have to have the same motivation for the end of what's happening in Gaza. You don't have to go to 1948, or you don't have to, the only thing you can say is babies are being killed. And babies shouldn't die. Stop. And the moment we're okay with it is the moment we become monstrous. And the moment we're okay with a world organized in the richest country in the history of the world, where people can't imagine themselves in the most expansive of terms. People can't, the richest country in the history of the world, we can't express basic commitments to one another because we're afraid that some lazy folk are going to take mine. Basic commitments. In the richest country in the history of the world, it seems to me you shouldn't go broke if you're sick. In the richest country in the history of the world, it seems to me it shouldn't matter what size your house is, which will determine the quality of your child's education. Right? In the richest country in the history of the world, if you're committed to law and order.
Did you say that?
Then it shouldn't apply just to some people. You're only concerned about it when your safety is in view, right? And then you're silent in other spaces. What does it mean to actually be decent? And it seems to me
that is good.
That's not. And if you think that's radical, I'm confused. What's radical about decency? Unless you're indecent. You see? And so I think, how do we change it? We come into this space, John, with Doc. We come in this space, Doc, with love. And love has edges. Love isn't a pillow. Right? It can be. Right? But love calls us into a different way of being in the world. And so, you got to tell the truth. As Baldwin put it, tell as much truth as we can bear, and then a little more.
That's good.
Yeah.
So, we have this movement, this energy, and we're really tired because election's coming up, and we're mobilizing and we're doing all of this extra stuff, get out to vote and so forth. But as soon as the election is over, it goes silent. So is there a call for action with being the leader that we can be in this message and this movement? Should it be continuous, going back to Ella Baker and her movement? Should we have more of that kind of model and for democracy? Absolutely.
In a vibrant democracy, voting is the last thing we do, right? Think about what happens because of all the big money in elections. Politicians spend most of their time once they get elected raising money. I mean, think about the amount of money that has been being spent. How many months did it take Kamala Harris to raise over $1 billion for an election? That's obscene. Sherrod Brown's election in Ohio, the most expensive Senate election in the history of the country, it's obscene. So, you got politicians busy running around, dealing with the free speech of money. While, the country's infrastructure, is crumbling around us, and a range of other issues that come into view. So part of our task in between election cycles, whatever that looks like these days, is to address the issues that face our community. Right? I will never forget Eddie Kayak. Eddie Kayak was a supervisor. Even though he was trying to get elected, he was putting shells in people's carport. You remember you get the shells dumped into your carport? Y'all are from the city. Y'all don't know nothing about this. But your driveway and everything. There was something where we were addressing the bad plumbing in particular communities, where we were trying to build the recreation center. There are things about the quality of life that define our day-to-day living together that we have to address as a community that's not reducible to election cycles.
That's right. That's good. Now we want to bring you guys into this conversation. You guys want to do that? So there's folks around the room with mics. Please ask the question. Don't declare your position or something like that. Just ask the question. Testimonies. So raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll bring over a mic to you. And here we go.
You can ask me
right
anything.
Right there.
You can ask me anything.
Right behind you. Okay, there we go. Yeah, right wherever you want. That'll be working.
Yes. First, thanks to both of you for being great Americans.
Thank you.
By every measure.
Thank you.
And by the way, you're better in person than you are on TV.
I like that person.
And you're good on TV. No matter how the election goes on Tuesday, you and Nicole Wallace and Mika and Joe, all the commentators must be talking about what is the narrative that follows one victory or another, or do you talk about that? Because coming Tuesday, you're going to have to somehow try to keep the nation together no matter how it goes.
Yeah, this is why Irish whiskey is in here. But you're right. I'm from the water. Y'all know a little bit about water here in Charleston, and about hurricanes. And I was talking to folks last night over dinner. Hurricanes are unique, are interesting. You have the front end, which will tear everything up, and then you have the calm of the storm, so you can go out and assess. But you can't get too confident. Why? Because the tail's coming. The tail's coming. For the first time, I think, in U.S. elections, presidential elections, I don't think a side will cede the legitimacy to whomever wins. So we already have deep-seated distrust about the electoral process in the system. I have a sneaking suspicion that Donald Trump will declare victory on Tuesday, unless it's a landslide. We really won't know who won, given the way Pennsylvania counts. They won't start counting the mail-in ballots until Tuesday. And there are hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots, and it's a very particular and meticulous process. So we need to buckle up, because the process is going to get really, really sticky. And all of the contradictions are going to be in full view. There are 20 million, at least 20 million Americans who will not accept any outcome other than the one that they want. And so our task in this moment is not to try to run over the divisions, not to hide the divisions, but to figure out how to speak to them in a way that can call people to be patriots in this moment. All of us, because we're going to face a challenge we haven't seen since 1860. And that's not hyperbole. You know your friends, right? I know mine.
Right.
And we know what's on the horizon. So how Joe and Mika will talk about it, I'm not sure. I know Nicole Wallace has been a kind of stalwart force. She's like, I'm not going to be pessimistic until it happens. And so buckle up, in my view. The tail's coming. I'll be shorter with my answers, I promise. I'm lying. It's so good to be back in Charleston.
Well, again, thank you. I'm affiliated with a very small HBCU in Columbia, a great one, Allen University. Woo! Yes! how do we bring this kind of a message to our young students? You know, at Allen University, many of our students are coming from poor rural areas. We give them the love. We have a phenomenal president that really is looking out for what you were saying when you went to Morehouse, which, by the way, is still very revered, all right, especially within our student population. To read, not just to read, but to read with extracting meaning. And where we are today in the world is frightening for educators. And I'm looking at these children, students walking our campus, and I'm listening to what you're saying today. And I'm saying, how do we bring that message? And to be able to build a sense of confidence that they have a voice that means something.
Yeah, you know, I don't know yet. No, I think it's really important. You know, sometimes, I said this last time I was here, sometimes because people run their mouths for a living, we think they have the answers to everything. And sometimes it's good to just simply say, I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure it out like you. I'm teaching these students. I've been teaching for 30 years. And I don't know what it is about the phones and it's changed the relationship to the word. They don't want to read deeply. They're reading surface like clickbaits. I guess that's why Axios, I guess we're doing it too, right? Because Axios is so quick with terms of the long form is disappearing. And so I'm not sure. Only thing I do know that works, and it works across technological innovation and shifts. Because people were saying the same thing about children when television hit. And the like. Every time you have a technological innovation, it rewires how we process information, and then we have panics about what is the future. What I know that's consistent across all of these moments is loving people to death. Placing a crown above those children's head, above those young folks' heads. I'm gonna put this crown above your head. Now I want you to grow into it. I say it to my students all the time. I say it to myself all the time. The world conspires to make you small. And the question you got to ask yourself repeatedly is, will you be complicit? And if you refuse to be complicit, then take giant steps, Coltrane style. Right? Place a crown above their heads. And once we place that crown above their heads, which is a set of expectations that's not rooted in philanthropy or charity or sentimentality, but in a fundamental love of who they are and who they can be, then we got the fertile soil to do the work we need to do.
Thank you very much. Maybe some of the answer to this question was in that discussion, but
Sure.
What was unsaid, you finished the book, it's been great, love the review. What's not said in the book that you'd want to say? What's undone that you think you could address?
What's not said in the book? What's not said in the book?
What's your vision for the future?
You know, I'm trying to figure out how to say this diplomatically.
Oh, okay. All right.
You know, I have a deep disdain for a certain model of leadership. You know, I want a pew-centered leadership, not a pulpit-centered leadership. What happens to a church when you got fans in the pews and a celebrity in the pulpit? When folk outsource their faith journey to celebrities, outsource their faith journey to one who holds the knowledge. So part of what I don't think I say explicitly is really a frontal assault on a certain model of black leadership. And I don't say explicitly in the book the deep disagreement that I have with my teacher, Cornel West, in this moment. That's just the petty, that's the specifics, but I can get into a broader vision, but we can talk about that later. And we got one over here.
Yeah.
Welcome to South Carolina.
Thank you, Doc.
All right.
Didn't USC win last night?
They did. When we look at We Are the Leaders we have been looking for, growing up male, Southern, and Black, one of the things that which I am aware of is the violence that can come with leadership. Yeah. Not just violence from people who look like you, but people who don't look like you. Yeah. So then how do you teach a generation of people that sometimes one might say the violence is a necessary part of being a leader, as in you are a target when you decide that you're going to speak up, when you want to see the healing of a society, that there are people who are willing to take you out?
Yeah.
Well, how do you teach that?
I learned it not simply by way of books. I learned it by watching Cornel West, The Man I Love. The only thing Cornel was doing was being the teacher that he is and speaking his mind, and I'm watching the death threats come in and all the things that would happen. He would have to be in a secure office at Princeton when I was a graduate student. And, I was like, Cornel, what are you doing? He said, brother, I'm walking with the arm of God. I'm good. And keep on, brother Eddie, you can't let these folks stop you on your vocation. You just got to keep doing what you're doing. You can't allow the fear to arrest your calling. Now, here I am all of these years later. My office is more secure than the president's office. You can't get in because of the death threats, right? My wife, I was just telling the story, my wife she loved sitting in the house with the door open. She can look out and see her little Japanese maple, and she loves to sit there. Man just showed up randomly at the house, scared her to death, walked into the garage the next time he came, scared her to death. Guy drove by in this real big, loud F-150. And when I see big F-150s, I'm listening for Rebel Yell next, And he had a flag with the black flag with the blue line and was driving through our circle real loud. And, I'm from Mississippi, so I went and got my 9. Right? Now I got to get rid of that 9 because I'm afraid my wife gonna shoot me. But the point still holds, right? You walk with your head on a swivel, right? You're not naive about the environment that you're in, but you can't let fear arrest your calling. And as Baldwin teaches me, you run towards the fear, and that model, right, is the lesson. You can't be didactic.
Okay, we can take one more question and then we have a special presentation.
Oh,
okay, well,
maybe two
more. Okay.
And I'll be quick.
Okay.
Dr. Glaude, last time you were here with us, you shared the story of your son showing up to the workplace and being mistaken for a perpetrator as opposed to
I forgot about that.
a lawyer. And I wonder if you could just kind of update us on his progress, and is he still working at the public defender's office?
Oh, Doc, thank you. I'm so proud of my boy. My baby, he just graduated from, my baby, he's 6'2", wearing a size 15, I don't know what it is. He graduated from Berkeley Law School. He will find out on November 8th whether he passed the California bar. And he's working for the Oakland Public Defender Service, and he's calling us every weekend to tell us the kind of work that he's been doing. And more importantly, because sometimes we reduce our lives to this sort of action, the young woman who showed him where the library was his freshman year is now his fiancée. I can't wait to have some baby. The baby's gonna be so pretty. The baby's gonna be so pretty.
We had one more question here.
I'm gonna use my coach voice.
Yes, sir.
Well, actually, we're recording it, so can you bring the mic up here?
Yes. And
Thank you so much.
Coach voices can be scary, too.
Yeah.
We like them scared. So we're in the home of Charleston, South Carolina, where the greatest act of forgiveness has ever been shown. So what is the role of forgiveness in the broader conversation that you've been talking about today.
Wow.
How do we forgive each other in this country?
Wow, wow, that's so wonderful. There's
That's a
a
good
wonderful
question.
book being published on Mother Beth that's coming out. Yes, stand up, tell them the title of the book. Come on.
Come on with the mic
Come
down
tell
here. Another mic.
Tell them who you are and the title of the book.
Wait, here it
Kevin
comes.
Sack. Come on, see, this is what we have to do, right?
All right.
Come on, Kevin.
You're really embarrassing me, Doctor.
That's the whole point.
My name is Kevin Sack, and next June 3rd, Crown will publish my book called Mother Emanuel.
Mother Emanuel.
Two centuries of race, resistance, and forgiveness in one Charleston church.
It is an extraordinary book. So next year, next Charleston Book Festival, we're going to all be here to celebrate that. Forgiveness is absolutely key. But it can't be sentimentality. Can't be sticky sentimentality. Forgiveness, and remember, it's the most powerful act of forgiveness. And it didn't have, how can I put this, y'all ready? It only had a little bit to do with white folks. The act of forgiveness is such that the evil doesn't take root in you. Because the moment you refuse to forgive, then the anger will overrun and overwhelm and deposit itself in you. And in order to release yourself from the anger, right? It's like my great grandmama said to me when I came home from Morehouse, this raging black nationalist. Remember, I read an autobiography of Malcolm X. I don't know what you're doing. You know white folk ain't gonna change. You keep dwelling on it, that shit gonna eat you up. This is a woman who spent her life as a domestic in houses of folks on the coast of Mississippi. She knew what she was talking about. Forgiveness is not only releasing, right, someone else into the possibility of being another human being. It's releasing you. And part of the work, Coach, that we have to do is to create the conditions under which we can be better people together.
What'd you think? What'd you think? South Carolina loves you. And Barbara, well, KK, we have a little special recognition we want to give you. You know, our favorite art piece, Barbara will tell you, is our sweetgrass baskets, right? You see them around here. And when we want to celebrate people that we admire, we give them a bouquet of our sweetgrass basket bouquet. So, Barbara, where are you? Somewhere in the audience over here. Can she brought those up. Come on up here and present that to us. Present that to them. Let's give them a round of a hug. Barbara is one of my favorite gala leaders. She also has the gala events, and she's done a great job of really just bringing this wonderful art and keeping this art here in our community, and we want you to have that.
Thank you.
How's that? Barbara, where is she? She up
Right
here? Pick one. Okay.
Beautiful bouquets for your wife.
Oh.
Because we know you don't really care for flowers.
Yes, he does. Let's give him another round, you guys. Thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate you.
All right, folks. Was this not wonderful? Fabulous. And this is only day 3. There is so much more to come. But thank you, Dr. Robinson Berry, and thank you, Dr. Glaude.
Thank you.
Okay? Very quickly, I want to thank our sponsors again, Walter and Jerry Federowitz, Lee and John McNary, and Russell Holliday. Now, before we leave, You can buy a copy of this fabulous book and many others right outside, and Dr. Glaude will be autographing the books, okay? Thank you for coming. What a fabulous morning, and look forward to seeing you at other sessions.
I've been coming to all